In this video, we'll discuss the events that occurred in 2013 in the English city of Oxford. 17-year-old Jayden Parkinson disappeared after leaving the hostel in which she lived. The police started searching for her immediately after receiving a missing persons report. While investigating this case, the police discovered something they had never faced before. Nothing like this has ever happened in the UK before. Jayden Parkinson was born in Folkestone, UK, on September 26, 1996. She was the youngest of 3 children in the family. Her parents' relationship was far from ideal. Jayden's mother, Samantha Shrewsbury, says her children have seen a lot of unpleasant things. Jayden's parents divorced when she was 7 years old. The girl stayed with her father but remained very close to her mother. They lived in different places and talked on the phone every night. When she became a teenager, her lifestyle became a bit chaotic. According to Samantha, Jayden's father allowed her to do whatever she wanted. She got into a company where she started smoking and drinking alcohol. She periodically lived with her father and then with her mother. At 13, she ran away from home and went to her mother, saying she wanted to live with her. Ultimately, the family court allowed Jayden to stay with her. She had conflicts with many people at school, including teachers. She didn't like that someone was trying to control her behavior. As for her personal life, she was in a relationship with Ben Blakely. Jayden was just 14 when she met former binman Blakely. They didn't live together as she was still a child, but like a dripping tap, he kept on at her and gradually changed her completely. Jayden started dating Ben when she was 15 years old. He was 20 years old at the time. Undoubtedly, the 5-year age difference worried Jayden's mother, but she couldn't do anything about her daughter falling in love. At first, their relationship was tender and romantic, but everything changed over time. There was no trace of the previous mutual understanding. Their relationship became very strained. Ben controlled all aspects of Jayden's life. She stopped wearing makeup and became more and more withdrawn. Ben even controlled what clothes she could wear. He made Jayden drift apart from family and friends. As a result, the girl moved out of her mother's house and started living in a hostel for women facing domestic violence. Although Ben was forbidden to come to this hostel, this did not prevent him from completely controlling her entire life. They often argued, and Jayden even warned the hostel staff that Ben was aggressive towards her. She couldn't do anything without his permission. He took her mobile phone from her, convincing her all she needed in the world was him and his love and care. Ben forbade her from talking with men. He controlled all her social media. She stopped attending school. Ben's level of control was so high that he even forbade her to leave her room to go to the toilet. Jayden used to talk to her mother on the phone every day, but now their communication has been reduced to 1 or 2 conversations per month. Samantha asked her daughter to return home and end her relationship with Ben, but the persuasion did not work. Ben controlled Jayden both psychologically and physically. She was seen several times with bruises on her face. On November 30th, 2013, Jayden called her mother and informed her that she was pregnant. She hoped that the child would force Ben to change his attitude towards her and his lifestyle in general. She thought the baby would strengthen their relationship and Ben would become the way he was when they first met. But he didn't live up to her expectations. As often happens in such cases, Ben stopped his good boy act when he established complete control over Jayden. She fell into a trap. He made her drift apart from her friends and family and depend only on him. She didn't have her own money, and as I said before, it got to the point where he forbade Jayden to leave her room, even if she needed to use the toilet. Behind her back, Ben dated other girls whom he also controlled psychologically and physically. When Samantha learned about her daughter's pregnancy, she again asked her to return home, yet Jayden refused. They met to discuss it, but Jayden was adamant. The girl didn't want to cause her mother any more trouble. When Jayden informed Ben of her pregnancy, he became furious and claimed that he was not the father of her child. He even threatened Jayden to post her naked photos and videos on social media. A few days before Jayden disappeared, she reported Ben to the police. She was afraid he would post her naked pictures and videos. Ben had about 30 photos and 13 videos featuring Jayden, and she didn't want them to be publicly available. On December 3rd, Jayden did not return to the hostel for the night. Aware of the problems in Jayden's personal life, the staff tried to find her. They contacted Samantha by phone, but she did not know where her daughter might be. Just after midnight on December 4th, 2013, the police received a missing persons report. Having learned about Jayden's problems in her personal life, investigators tried to contact Ben to find out if he knew anything about her disappearance. He was very aggressive and hung up the phone several times, saying he couldn't help and didn't know where Jayden might be. Jayden had a difficult childhood, and she periodically quarreled with her family. She ran away from home several times but then returned. Therefore, her disappearance didn't seem unusual in the first hours of the investigation. On the same day, December 4th, the police arrested Ben Blakely. They took him to the police station, and it was not related to Jayden's disappearance. A few days before, Jayden reported Ben to the police because she was afraid he would post her intimate photos on the internet. The investigators who spoke with him did not know the police were looking for Ben as a person of interest in the Jayden Parkinson disappearance case. He denied his intentions to post images of Jayden on the internet and was released on bail the same day. Samantha was distributing flyers with her daughter's picture. She also used social media to draw attention to the case, hoping that someone had seen something or might know where Jayden might be. Meanwhile, the police checked surveillance cameras to discover her last known location. They obtained CCTV footage from the hostel Jayden lived in. The footage shows her leaving to meet Ben, but never returning. It was on December 3rd. The next place where Jayden was spotted was Oxford Railway Station. CCTV footage shows her walking inside with Ben. Nothing unusual is happening in the video. After tracing their journey, investigators learned that Ben and Jayden boarded a train to the town of Didcot, about 10 miles from Oxford. The last known location of Jayden was the train station in Didcot. The footage showed her and Ben leaving the building. Usually, when Jayden ran away from home, she would contact someone from her family over the next day or two and say that she was okay. But this time, everything was different. Days passed, but Jayden did not call her family or friends or appear on her social networks. Since the CCTV footage showed her boarding a train with Ben, he became the prime suspect in her disappearance. The police did not doubt that Ben knew where Jayden was and what had happened to her. The footage showed Ben returning to the train station alone, yet no one saw Jayden alive ever again. A week later, on December 10th, 2013, the police arrested Ben Blakely. Investigators wanted to talk to him and figure out where Jayden went after they left the train station building in Didcot together. At that time, the police did not rule out the possibility that Jayden was hiding. There was also the possibility that Ben was holding her against her will somewhere. During the interrogation, Ben behaved very confidently. He stated that he did not know where his ex-girlfriend was. Ben called Jayden his ex-girlfriend. According to him, he and Jayden broke up, and she had another boyfriend. Ben said that's who the police needed to talk to. He also said he didn't care where she was or what happened to her because they broke up, and now he had a new girlfriend. He advised the police to access her social media to check her location and who she was meeting with. Although Jayden was still missing, Ben Blakely was arrested on suspicion of kidnapping and taking her life. The police interviewed Jayden's friends to learn if she could have gone somewhere, but all the investigators discovered was that Jayden became estranged from her friends after she started dating Ben. Therefore, no one knew if she had a place where she could hide. During the ongoing search for Jayden, investigators received crucial information from a taxi driver from Didcot. He said that at about 1 a.m. on December 4th, he picked up a passenger on a dirt road. He described him as a young man with a large and heavy suitcase smeared with mud. He couldn't lift it and asked the taxi driver to help him. All these circumstances made the taxi driver think about what was in the suitcase and that he could have witnessed the crime. Investigators determined that the person who called the taxi used Ben Blakely's mobile phone. When the police questioned Ben again, the latter stated he would not answer any more questions. After analyzing the location records of his mobile phone, the police learned that Ben had been to several places in Didcot. And one of those places was an abandoned barn in the countryside, where a taxi picked him up that night. A team of investigators, criminologists, and dog handlers went there to investigate. It also became known that Ben and Jayden had been there before because her mother lived in Didcot. Next to the barn, the police found a bracelet similar to the one Jayden was wearing. Service dogs trained to search for dead bodies started barking inside the barn, but Jayden's body wasn't there, and it probably had something to do with the suitcase Ben was with when getting into the taxi. The police asked the public for help, urging everyone who saw a man carrying a large suitcase in the Didcot countryside to report it. At the same time, the police went door to door and interviewed residents of the houses closest to the abandoned barn. The video from the train station shows that Ben and Jayden did not have a suitcase with them. Therefore, the investigators wanted to find out where Ben got this suitcase. But what if the man described by the taxi driver wasn't Ben? The police found the answer to this question on December 14th. Investigators discovered that Ben Blakely's grandmother, grandfather, and younger brother, Jake, lived near the abandoned barn. The first thing Ben's grandmother asked when the police knocked on her door was, "Are you here about the suitcase?" She said there was a suitcase that Ben had taken from her a few days ago. He came in a hurry and said he needed a suitcase, dumping its contents on the floor without explaining anything. According to Ben's grandmother, he returned it 2 days later and threw it in the barn. However, now it was dirty. She also mentioned 2 missing shovels that later reappeared in their place again. The shovels were also covered with a thick layer of dirt. Why would Ben need 2 shovels? Perhaps the man didn't act alone. 17-year-old Jake Blakely was a friend of Jayden. She met Ben through him. Witnesses said they saw Ben and Jake riding dirt bikes together when the police started searching for Jayden. The police arrested Jake Blakely on suspicion of complicity in the crime. They sent the suitcase Ben returned to his grandmother's barn to the laboratory for analysis. The police needed to know if Jayden's DNA was on it. Based on all the available evidence, investigators came up with a version that Jayden was deprived of her life in an abandoned barn, then, after some time, placed in a suitcase and transported to another place where the perpetrator buried her. But given the vast area of the fields that surround Didcot, finding Jayden's body seemed like a difficult task. The police involved aviation in the investigation to determine the approximate place of Jayden's burial. Thanks to aerial photography, they identified 10 places where a significant change in the soil surface has recently occurred. The police checked several locations, but it did not bring results. They couldn't find Jayden's body. Before the police checked all 10 places of interest in the investigation, there was another breakthrough in the case. Jake Blakely started cooperating with police, telling them to check his uncle's grave at a local cemetery. The cemetery next to the All Saints Church in Didcot was one of the 10 places where the surface has changed recently. But the cemetery was the last on this list, since there is nothing unusual in a soil surface change in such places. The police cordoned off the cemetery after investigators received a note from Jake Blakely in which he said that Jayden's body might be in his uncle's grave. Detectives have never seen such a way to hide a victim's body. According to information from the English press, Ben and Jake's uncle was buried in 2006. The new circumstances of this case have attracted widespread media attention. It was the first crime in the country when the victim's body was in an already existing grave. Having set up a tent in the cemetery, the forensic experts began their work. After some time, Jayden's family received the worst possible news. The police found her body in the grave of Ben and Jake Blakely's uncle. She was naked, and the police couldn't find her clothes. She also had all her jewelry removed. The forensic examination established that someone had beaten Jayden before her death. Finger marks on her neck indicated strangulation. The pathologist named asphyxia as the official cause of her death. While awaiting trial in prison, Ben Blakely changed his behavior strategy. After speaking with the prison chaplain, he and his lawyer wrote a letter stating that he was responsible for Jayden's death. However, Ben claimed that the crime was not premeditated. According to him, he pushed Jayden during an argument. She fell off a bridge located near an abandoned barn. He tried to bring her to her senses but couldn't do it. At first, He buried Jayden's body in one place, but then moved it to the cemetery and buried it in his uncle's grave. However, the autopsy didn't show any signs of such a fall. There were blunt force injuries on her face, and as I said before, the cause of her death was asphyxia. It meant that Ben Blakely was lying to absolve himself of some responsibility for what happened. Jayden's father died due to heart problems before the trial even began. On June 23, 2014, Blakely appeared in court. It became evident to everyone that this man had no remorse for what he had done. He behaved provocatively and shouted insults, making it clear that he was indifferent to the fact that he had taken the life of Jayden and her unborn child. The 4-week trial heard Ben Blakely, of Reading Berks, was a violent and controlling boyfriend. 3 of Blakely's previous girlfriends testified that he was controlling and violent to them when they were in a relationship with him. The jury heard he would take their telephones, hit them, and would grab them by the throat if they answered back, or if he thought they might be cheating on him. The ginger-haired murderer's short temper was apparent during the trial. He was warned several times by the judge about his 4-letter outbursts in the dock and on the witness stand, where he repeatedly swore and shouted at the prosecutor Richard Latham. His rages proved too much at times for Jayden's mother and other family members, who at times were forced to flee the courtroom in tears. It was also too much for Judge Patrick Eccles, who sent Ben down to the cells and continued the trial in his absence one day. Although Jake Blakely is aged under 18, Judge Eccles lifted the usual ban on reporting a juvenile's name because he felt it was in the public interest to do so. Jake has pleaded guilty to perverting the course of justice, but said he thought he was burying weapons or dead animals at the time. Ben had told his teenage sibling that he would give him an Xbox games console and £100 for carrying out the evil deed, the jury heard. The jury saw CCTV footage showing Ben and Jayden entering the train station in Oxford and boarding a train to Didcot. The footage also showed Blakely returning alone and looking down, trying to hide his face. According to the prosecutor, it was a premeditated crime. Blakely deliberately lured Jayden to a place where no one would see him taking her life. What other reason could he have to take Jayden to an abandoned barn in another town? After learning she was pregnant, Jayden wanted to start a new life. But Blakely was used to controlling every aspect of her life, and he wouldn't let her go. He didn't want to become a father either. Jayden's mother, Samantha Shrewsbury, supported the demands to create a domestic violence registry. In an interview with Sky News, she said the following words: "I don't want another mom to have to stand there and look at their daughter's body on a slab. I will never forget that until the day I die. For the year before Jayden was killed, I thought it was me he was targeting. I didn't expect it to be her. I really thought he wanted me out the way. He could manipulate her. He could get money out of her." I remember him coming around one day after he'd spat at her the day before and punched her in the face. He managed to get into the block of flats and he was banging on the door. I refused to let him see Jayden, so he walked off and spat at me. Later that afternoon, Jayden went outside for a cigarette and I didn't see her again for 2 weeks. He had met her outside. She was at an age when she had no income or benefits. They were living rough, here, there, and everywhere. It became hard to contact her. He would cut up her SIM card or break her phone. She didn't want to admit to herself that that was what he was like. Everybody had heard the stories before. She wanted to change him. He burnt her, beat her, starved her. She was a wayward teenager that wasn't listening. I was told because she was 16, it didn't matter where she went. If the police said it was okay for her to stay there, they didn't have to tell me where she was. I didn't have a leg to stand on. But when she was murdered, she was classed as a child. Where does that get lost? Why couldn't the police bring her back home? She was safe with me. I do believe that she could have been helped if people believed she wasn't a naughty kid and I wasn't an irate mom with a wayward child that was on benefits, that didn't deserve to be looked at or listened to. I'm angry at the government, really angry. It's got to stop. There were other girls that were hurt before my Jayden. If there was a register then, she would be sat here with my grandchild now. The register should be public and everybody should be able to access it, not just the police or social services. The amount of times he had been arrested, there would have been flags all the way along. That could have saved her life. I'd also like a program rolled out in schools about healthy relationships. A lot of people don't realize they're in a coercive, controlling relationship until it's too late. I just want more protection for women like my Jayden and the women that are to come. 2 women are killed every week in England by a partner or ex-partner. In my lifetime, I know I won't eradicate it. But if I can stop one girl from dying and one mom feeling like I do, then Jayden's death will not be in vain. The jury deliberated for 20 hours before reaching a verdict. By a majority vote, 11-1, Ben Blakely was found guilty of intentionally taking the life of Jayden Parkinson. The judge told Ben Blakely, "On December 3rd, you took Jayden Parkinson, a complicated but loving and vulnerable 17-year-old girl, into open countryside near Upton in the dark of an early winter's evening. You murdered her by strangulation." The judge added that unreasonably jealous Blakely's treatment of Jayden had involved physical and emotional abuse during their relationship. "You dominated and controlled her daily life," the judge said. "You removed her phone so she couldn't contact others, and when she was at the hostel, you demanded that she stayed in her room, even to the extent of forbidding her from using the toilet, forcing her to urinate in a plastic bottle. Jayden was infatuated with you, her violent abuser, and found it difficult to separate emotionally from you." The judge said Jayden finally plucked up the courage to end the relationship in November last year, with Blakely threatening to pose intimate photographs online to humiliate her. The court sentenced Jake Blakely to 3 years in prison for perverting the course of justice. In July 2014, his older brother Ben Blakely was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 20 years.